Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we are delighted to talk to really a member of the family, director, creative writer, Barry Jenkins, who we have been working with since the very beginning, I think, Barry. So we're happy to have you back. We're going to kick things off for introducing you to the African members on the call today, starting with Kim Singleton in New York, New York, Derek Dunn in Washington, D.C., Nick Hamilton in Los Angeles, Michael Sorrell in Washington, D.C., Sam Leggett in Washington, D.C., Ruben Perlada in South Florida, Dana Abercrombie in New York, New York, and I think that's everybody. If I missed anyone, my apologies. But we're going to kick it off.
Who's in South Florida?
Ruben.
Okay.
You'll when you hear his accent, you'll know. We were just together. We just did an Afro-Latino film short competition in Fort Lauderdale last weekend. I'm going to let you guys do what you do so well, and I'll see you on the other side.
It's time. I'll tell you a story.
A story! So glad I brought some crickets.
Rafiki, keep going.
The story about a prince who would come to be known as Scar and an orphan named Mufasa. Two brothers who set off on a dangerous journey to find a new home and a new family.
Why are you following us?
I was hoping to find my pride.
My name is Mufasa.
I'm Sarabi.
My name is Taka. He's going to start a new kingdom. Come with us. You don't have anyone.
She does indeed have someone.
That's Zazu, my scout. Don't eat him.
You heard her. Do not eat me. Places to go, kingdoms to see.
Finally, food.
If you take my life, you will never find where you are going.
Taka, do not eat him.
Wonderful. Another we're not supposed to eat.
You expect us to follow this hallucinating baboon? No offense.
We go together. Outsiders! This is not a drill.
There will be one Lion King.
We have to carry on. We owe that to each other.
We're trapped. What do we do?
Get ready to run!
I never signed up for this.
We have come to rule without mercy.
This was a bad idea! I will not bend to evil. We must fight together.
We are nearing destiny, Mufasa. And so, the earth must shake.
Oh, stand down. I am highly trained and occasionally effective. Whoa! We go together.
Hi, Barry. I'm the one from South Florida with my accent.
Yeah, I hear it. That was like home.
Thank you for doing this. I really enjoy, and my daughter also loved it. And I have to be honest, the first time that I heard they're gonna do a movie about Mufasa, I said, like, why? Why we have to do this recycle? And then I watched the film, and then I do my research. And I wonder, what was your thought when you had this proposal, and how was that vision that you had when you had the screen and you had the meeting with Lin-Manuel and the whole crew?
Yeah, I kind of had the same reaction you had when I heard the idea of the film. Just the idea of the film. I was like, what more is there to know about this character? You know, The Lion King has been around for, at the point that I got approached about the project, 25 years. Now it's like 30 years. So I had the same reaction that you did. But then I read the script and I was really surprised by all the things about Mufasa and Scar, aka Taka, that I didn't know. I was surprised about how many things I had assumed that in this telling of the story weren't necessarily the case. And I think I was also just moved. I've always been someone who I'm really interested about this idea of power, of leadership, royalty, monarchy, all those different things, and the very limited pathways to achieve those things, the very limited pathways to quote unquote achieve greatness. And I thought it was a really wonderful way to, because when you think of The Lion King, you're thinking about children processing some very complex emotions for the first time. And in this case, I always remember when the first teaser for this movie released, a young woman commented on my Instagram page, and she was like, I cannot wait to see this film. As someone who came through the foster care system, I just never imagined that someone like Mufasa would have been someone who had came through the foster care system. And so it was a combination of all those different things. And I thought, you know what, there's more here than one I allowed myself to see when I just heard the idea for the project, because I said no until I read the script. And then I thought too that there was just something that I could express that I've expressed in my earlier work, but on just a much larger canvas. And so that was the combination of things. Lin came into the project kind of late. Typically with a musical, you start with the songs, but he was too busy on Encanto and Tick, Tick, Boom. So he came into the project after we had already started making the film. The good thing about that is typically in a musical, you're trying to fold the movie around the songs because they come first. In this case, Lin got to see the movie we were making and try to figure out, okay, how can the songs help tell the story? So that was kind of the process.
Thank you so much and congratulations. Amazing film.
Appreciate it, Ruben.
Hi, Dana Abercrombie, the Coalition. Thank you so much for speaking to us. My question is, I love that this was both an origin story of the characters that we've known, but also the land, especially with Pride Rock. Can you talk about extending that relationship with the animal kingdom and that land and kind of discovering any kind of probably nuances that wasn't originally planned that wasn't originally shown in the Lion King original?
Yeah, that was one of the really great things about making a movie this way is you can create anything. It kind of reminded me of when I first got into film school, where a professor told me, if you can imagine what's in the frame, there's no reason you, from your background, from where you're from, can't utilize it as well as some kid from Beverly Hills, et cetera, and so forth. And I loved the idea of in this film using these virtual production tools that if we could think of it, we could create it, essentially. And so once we knew that the movie was going to be this journey for Mufasa, sort of he gets taken away from his home, and then he has to journey to what ultimately ends up becoming the Pride Lands. We saw it as a really great opportunity to sort of like create this sort of journey across not the entire continent of Africa, but to really be grounded and try to map out, okay, where did he start? Where did he get taken to? And then what land is he journeying through on his way to Malele or to Pride Rock? And then when he gets there, there's no reason that Pride Rock has to already exist. And so those things didn't exist when I first came onto the project. Working with my production designer from the Underground Railroad of Bill Street Guitar, Skymark Freeberg, he just came into my office one day, and the mountain was already there. And he showed me just like 5 images stepping through of how, in an earthquake, Pride Rock would form. And again, when you're making sort of like this prequel, you assume that everything always just was. And I love that this symbol, Pride Rock, sort of came out of this energy of the completion of this journey that Mufasa and Rafiki have to go on. So it was kind of like that, just playing around. And we actually mapped the whole journey out. Like I could put up a map and show you exactly where the characters are at any point in their journey. I could tell you how long it would take them in reality to actually walk the steps to get there. We try to be really thoughtful with all of it. The other thing that happened, Dana, was because we started during COVID, we thought, we had planned to go to the continent. And typically you do that on a film scout. You're in a helicopter for like 7 days and you're like, you're half a day here or half a day there. We couldn't do that because of the pandemic. So instead we reached out to all these artists and conservationists in the areas we had already mapped out. And we stayed in touch with them for about 18 months. And they were sending us photos, videos. And the question was, what is the most interesting thing about your landscape or your environment that you would like the world to see? And that was how we started building all the landscapes, all the environment you see in the film.
Exceptional job. I truly felt like I was in the moment and right there learning about the environment. So thank you so much.
You know what's cool? Taka the name of the character who played that becomes Scar. When you go back to the '94 film, Mufasa translates in Swahili to king, and Taka, the most common translation, is garbage. Again, 1994 was a very simple time, but no parent is going to name their child garbage. So because we had mapped this region that the characters journey through, I reached out to some of the actors I'd worked with on the Underground Railroad, Tuso especially, and she reached out to her people, and we found out that I believe it was in Botswana. There's a saying, Roto Takatui, which translates to the Holy Spirit. And so in my mind, Obasi and Eshe named Taka after the spirit and not after garbage. So it was like little things like that. And we actually had a scene that we created that sort of, Taka has this dream. He wakes up and he sees his father speaking to him from the afterlife, and he tells him that story because Taka's trying to figure out, why am I named this? But not everything makes it into the film. Not everything makes it into the film. But as Mahershala said about Moonlight, he and Janelle had all these scenes, just domestic scenes around the house that didn't make it to the final cut. He said, it's not in the film, but it's in the performance. And I think Kelvin can perform Taka with his head held high. And, Lenny James and Tandiwe can speak to him like a son because they know what his name means.
Exceptional. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Nigeria Chambers. I'm from Big Go Belt Media, based out of Washington, D.C. Barry, thank you for the time today. Typically, dedications are held to the end of the film, but you, and rightfully so, wasted no time in ensuring that the legend and the king himself was honored at the very beginning of this film. Can you talk to me about that decision and what James Earl Jones' legacy meant to you?
It meant a lot to me. I'll start at the end. The legacy meant a lot to me. As someone who grew up, kind of like this kid in Moonlight, like Chiron, without a traditional father figure. My coaches, when I was playing sports, were kind of my father figures, but it kind of ended there. And so you look to the things that you're watching, and it's kind of the legacy of James Earl Jones. He's both the king of Zamunda and Coming to America, but then he's also, the voice of Mufasa and the Lion King. And that voice, and again, when you watch the OG Lion King, it's the first time children are processing what it might be like to lose a parent. When Simba's there crying over Mufasa, it gets in you. And so as we were making the film, it was, after Mr. James Earl Jones passed, I couldn't really go into work and not think about him. And I always try to put myself in the mind of the audience. Like I was saying to Ruben, I had the same experience he did when I first heard about or was approached about the project, but then I read the script and I had a different experience. And I imagined the audience having a similar experience to the one I was having while I was working on the film. And I was like, I don't think anyone should be sitting through this movie feeling this acknowledgement without the acknowledgement having not occurred. And so we just went in. Me and Joy went in, and we just did it, and we presented it to the studio. And to their credit, they saw right away that it was the right thing to do. The interesting thing about it is we pulled the audio from both the 1994 film and the 2019 film, because James Earl Jones recorded those lines in both iterations. And I'm not going to say which version is the one that's at the top of the film, but I thought it was the most appropriate way, the only appropriate way to open the movie.
Thank you so much for your time, and an amazing decision to do so, because that's the moment we knew we were going to shed tears. So let's just get that out the way right now.
Exactly, just get it out the way. Just get it out the way, man.
Happy Wednesday to you, Mr. Jenkins. Derek Dunn, Reason Dunn. So I'm not a Lion King fan outside of the play, but I have to give credit where it's due. I was immersed the entire time. And my question was, did you always have Kelvin and Aaron in mind for your two lead roles?
No, I didn't have him in mind at all. I mean, maybe Aaron a little bit, just because, I first saw him on stage in London, larger than life. And when you're in a theater, this is an outdoor theater, you have to project, and you can just feel like you're sitting in the back of the theater and this man's voice is still reaching you. And it feels like somebody's driving like a 1985 like Buick LeSabre down the block, you know what I'm saying? And windows are shaking, which is a crazy thing for someone to do with their tool, like in an outdoor setting. So maybe in the back of my mind, but you still had to audition. Kelvin did not consider at all, particularly because this character, the lineage that this character speaks with an English accent. But what I love is that with a movie like this, everything happens in voice. In baseball, they say you're a 5-tool player. Well, imagine taking 4 of those tools away from the player and seeing, can you still knock it out of the park? And I thought Kelvin's tape, because it was all just audio tapes, he just felt like the character. When you watch the original Lion King, Jeremy Irons, I think the reason why there was enough energy for this film, yes, he's the bad guy. Yes, he's the villain. And it's a very simple depiction, just a purely bad person. But you can hear all this woundedness, all this heartache, all this heartbreak, all this bitterness in the performance. And I thought Kelvin did a really great job of actualizing that with his voice. And so I didn't think of them beforehand, but once, because that whole MLK thing, the genius, that happened after we had already started working with them. They did our movie first, went off and did that. I had no idea they were even doing it. And then it came out before our movie finished. And I was like, what the hell is this? And they just kind of both laughed because they first met through this process. So it wasn't intentional, but I think they do a wonderful job together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Kim Singleton, Consider It Blacklit podcast and television show out of New York City. And I am still amazed at how far technology has come. And talk to us about some of the challenges you had or any added challenges you had in directing in a virtual space versus your traditional movies.
Yeah, the challenge really was, I think that when you make a movie, there's a relationship between, and this is a relationship we've really evolved, and I think it came to, it's sort of like its apex on the show we did, The Underground Railroad, where the camera it's almost like and I'm going to sound crazy, it's almost like a spiritual kind of presence. And I think the only way that works is if the camera is directly motivated, directly influenced, directly touched by the performance of the characters. But when you come to something like this, instead of capturing an image, you're creating everything. You have total control. And so it can be difficult if you and I are in a conversation and out of nowhere, I stand up and step towards you, you might instinctively step back. And when you step back or I step up, the camera is going to adjust based on the changed energy in the room. That was the thing that it was most difficult to translate with this technology when we started. But then slowly over time, there were these cats who worked on the Avatar films. We went down and visited them. A couple of them came up and started working with us. And we figured out a way to get to the point where we could create everything with the technology except the movements of the characters. And so we got the animators in sort of costumes or these motion capture suits similar to what they do on Planet of the Apes. The difference is, those characters walk on 2 legs. We also walk on 2 legs. So you really can translate exactly what the actor's doing on set. Because our characters have 4 legs, it's not as smooth a translation, but the animators understand how to move that. It's rough, but it works. And we can still have this relationship between camera and movement. So we directed the whole film. And when I say we, I mean me, myself, and my editor, Joy McMillan, because she's always cutting every iteration of this thing. We directed the whole film in voice and had the whole movie cut together, and we could blast the scenes, the audio of the scenes onto the stage. The animators are listening to the actual principal cast. And if they hear something that's fearful, or I hear something that's fearful, or I want to change, okay, he said it that way, but he didn't mean it that way. So now I want you to turn your back. We could do those things like that. And the camera, which is there live as well, James Laxton, we can move in relation. And that's when I feel like some of the textures start to open up in the film.
Wow. Well, you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Hi, Brandon Collison, Media and Popcorn Podcast. Going back to a previous comment you made, Scar is one of my favorite villains of all time. And so I'm curious about what your perspective was of the character before joining the project and how that changed with developing Taka, aka Scar's backstory and characterization with Kelvin Harrison Jr. for this film.
Yeah, I mean, I love bad guys just like everybody else. I might love bad guys a little bit more. I was watching Die Hard on the plane. I was flying back from London, and when Hans Gruber gets let go from the thing, I felt for him, bruh. I really did, because he almost won. He almost won, although he did kill a few people in that movie, so I guess he deserved to get dropped off the side of the building. But as I was saying earlier, when you hear Jeremy Irons performing that character, there's just more there. There is just more. And also, too, there's somebody that eloquent, the way he performs that character in the original film. I wonder what the hell happened between these two people to turn this person's heart, that dark, to turn that person's heart, that evil. And so I had an open mind. And honestly, when I came onto the project, I started looking for, what else with Taka, is interesting. I'm literally creating scenes outside the film, like this thing with explaining his name, because I'm looking at this character and what I see is, I think Mufasa is going to be one case where I think if you're a child, or like us, if you were children and you love these characters, you're going to get a new, more complex understanding of why Mufasa became James Earl Jones, the full embodiment, of greatness, of wonder, of royalty, of regalness. You're going to get a more well-rounded depiction of how that is, of why the world led that person to evolve to the best version of themselves. The same thing with Taka. You're going to get a lesson. Hate this person. But when he was a child, I mean, like anybody, he was worthy of nurturing, worthy of love. What led him to evolve to become the worst version of himself? And you can see it in a way. Mufasa comes into this family, and Mufasa gets this wonderful parenting. You have to be one with the elements, no animal is below another, the circle of life, etc. The other parent is telling him, everyone is beneath you. Everything is due you. You can nap, and even your napping is the embodiment of power. And if necessary, deceit is the tool of a great king. So I thought showing, this well-rounded depiction of what his environment was and how that led to the person we met in 1994. I don't know. I thought that was, I was very energized and invigorated by it. And a lot of it was already done in the script when I came on.
Thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you, man.
Hey, Barry, Nick Hamilton, Nightcast Media. I wanted to ask you, just as the director, obviously, kind of guiding this film and making sure that everything is where it's supposed to be, but primarily want to ask you about some of the actors that you had the pleasure working with from this dynamic cast. Aaron, Pierre, Beyonce, and Seth Rogen. How are you able to see them in these characters and be able to have their voices give these characters life?
Yeah, it was dope. I didn't have to see him, and that was like one of the best things. Again, Beyonce's used to using, I don't know, she uses multiple tools, but the voice is her primary tool. One of the big, when the voices happen in this movie, it's the very first thing. There's no art, there's no sort of like sets. It's really just telling a story with voice, and because of that, everything's possible. And so I tried. You just named Aaron, Beyonce, and Seth Rogen. Very different performers, and they do very different things. You think with Seth, who's always working with Billy Eichner, it's all wide open. We're improvisation. I tried to do the same thing with Beyonce, to be honest. That last scene in the film, I remember telling her, I know it's the Lion King, but put a little more Houston on it. When she says, baby, I'm right here and I'm fine. And so it was like, I was just trying to have fun with everybody, no matter what the tone of the scene was. Aaron's got to do a lot of heavy lifting. He's playing this person who we know is going to become so great, so supreme. And yet, because of what happens to him earlier in the film, he's literally afraid of water, which is like a crazy thing. I don't know if you've met Aaron Pierre or seen him in real life. This guy is like larger than life. There's a reason he was named a character mid-sized sedan. And yet this person has to make themselves very small, very unsure. And so working with the actors in the very beginning of the process when it was wide open, it was really fun, man. We all tried to sort of not be beholden to, where does the scene begin and end? It was more about like, what does it feel like and what else can we bring to it?
But you know what? Excellent job. And I love the way you brought Blue Ivy in as Kiara. That was pretty slick too.
You know what? She did. I was so proud of her because the movie takes so long to make. Like what you're hearing is not the Blue Ivy who was on the Renaissance tour. It wasn't a Blue Ivy at the premiere. This is Blue Ivy as like a 9.5, 10-year-old person, And again, working with Dr. John Connie, who's one of the most seasoned performers. You know, this guy's done, you know, like Shakespeare, everything, New York, Broadway, South Africa, the whole deal. And she's in scenes with him, you know, and she's absolutely holding her own. My again, because it's a meritocracy, if you can convince me with your voice, you got the part. But when children go into the movie, they're going to be looking for themselves somewhere in the film. And this character, Kiara, is literally the child in the movie who's listening to this story, who's witnessing the story of this great ancestor. And for whatever reason, you know, again, I don't know Blue well. You know, I've met Miss Tina a few times. I can see where that ancestry is coming from, but she was so prepared and she understood what was happening in those scenes. I think she gives a really wonderful performance.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Sowell from Washington, D.C. First, again, congratulations with this film. I remember when you were at CinemaCon and revealing this film, definitely to get this sense of like a emotional journey and process it took to actually reveal it to the public. But as this, you know, being revealed to the public for both adults who grew up with the original film and also children of the current generation, this story is capturing all full perspectives of not just a hero and villain perspective, just as we got recently with Wicked, like characters we've been knowing as villains for almost decades now, to telling that to children. And now as an adult, I'm have more grace for a character like Scar that I didn't have when I was a child. Do you talk about in terms of what type of response you want children to receive from watching this film in terms of understanding the full aspect of Mufasa as well as Scar from when they're children to when they become adults?
Yeah, I just think that, you know, 1994 and 2024 are two very different times. I think our children are just receiving way, way more stimulus, way, way more information beyond our control. The things that they're watching, the things they're seeing. I think because of that, these depictions of good and evil, you know, of who is a leader and who is not, of who gets to be a leader, of what power is and how it manifests and corrupts, those depictions just, they demand to be much more complex, you know, much more fully fleshed in a 2024 context. And so there are some children who I imagine maybe might encounter this version of Mufasa first, which is kind of crazy. I was just thinking the other day, you could watch these movies, you could watch this one, and then you could go and either watch the 2019 or the 1994. And what would that be, you know, if you're watching it in sequence versus, you know, folks like us who have been living with the 1994 for the longest, or some of those children who were introduced to these characters in 2019 and have formed, we've all been forming a very deep relationship to these characters over the 30 years or the 5 years, whatever have you. And we judge them, you know, we've decided who they are and why they are. I think it's really wonderful to now get to sort of recontextualize and maybe look at ourselves a little bit and start to do a little bit of that work, even if you're a child of, oh, but he was so happy, you know, but they love each other, you know. I'm trying to think of the way a parent might talk through some of these things with a child. And I think giving just a much richer and much more complex sort of like bedrock or depiction of these characters, yeah, I think it's a wonderful, it was something I was very aware of as I started making the film.
Well, I just want to say, as being the youngest person
let me say it. And it's not about apologizing for Scar, because I do think, you know what I'm saying, he you know, what he did in 1994 was heinous. But at the same time, you know, going to the root and seeing how we all participated or how the world participated and how it became that way, I think is really important.
Well, I just want to say, as being the youngest person in this call, it's probably not a story I did ask for, but it's a story I needed. And I just want to say thank you again for continuing on with this process so we can see this film. Thank you.
I appreciate that, man.
Hey, how you doing, Barry? My name is Samuel Legan with JVS Media Productions. Thanks for talking with us today. One of the things that I got from this film, and I didn't anticipate getting it, because this is kind of a prequel / progression from what they did from the 2019 version and of course the original, but the aspect of generational wisdom and impartation of what true guidance, discipleship, what that looks like, because his relationships with Rafiki, his parents, his adopted mother, it taught him great foundational things for him to understand, like, no, I have to put forward. I have to be able to reflect. I have to be able to discern what I should do instead of just act. And that wasn't something that Taka got. Taka got a lot of reflection of, this is yours, your ownership. And a lot of people now, our generation now, are dealing with that dichotomy and the certain issue. And I don't know if that was something that kind of you wanted to kind of unpack with us talking with it today, because that's what I got from it. And I feel like this is something that will help my kids moving forward as well. Because honestly, I gained a lot from my grandparents. I gained a lot of foundational understanding of how to do things and understand what is the right thing to do. And sometimes we're not getting that because we get stuff so quickly. But go ahead.
Yeah. I just, I was, again, I'm going back to Ruben's question much earlier, and me seeing myself like in that question, or my experience of working on this film and that question. And I remember realizing that for a lot of this film, it was going to reflect what theoretically is the audience of this movie, which is there is like a 4/7-year-old person who's constantly in dialogue with like a 90-year-old person. I'm talking of Kiara and Rafiki. And Rafiki is literally telling her sometimes, when your grandfather did this, it's a really wonderful conversation. And I was surprised that, once you start making something, it's like let's say you're working on a Stevie Wonder movie. You start hearing Stevie Wonder everywhere you go. I started realizing there's this vacuum of depictions of grandchildren and their ancestors, grandchildren and their grands, having conversations about life, like the full spread of experience and us exchanging sort of that experience. I think then when we go back, I love the way Eshe treats Mufasa and Taka. She just doesn't get to spend enough time with Taka, but the way she treats Mufasa fills this huge vacuum in his life that is created by this flood. And when I think about the original Lion King, which is a masterpiece, it's a classic, I saw some of these conversations that absolutely happened in that story, but they didn't happen in that film. And it felt like a really great opportunity to sort of expand, particularly when you're dealing with a movie that's, look, they're talking lions, but it still is the first time many people encounter the continent of Africa on a global scale. And this idea of ancestry, of grands and their grandchildren exchanging knowledge, I mean, it's the bedrock, I remember as a kid going to church. I didn't go to church with my mom. My grandma took me, and I sat next to her. She'd be unfolding those peppermints. And then afterwards, we'd be going home and we'd be talking about the scripture. So, I mean, look, it's a big, big, big film, Lion King, all this other stuff. But I see you, Samuel, and I appreciate you saw me.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking this on. And I think that for generations to come, we're going to get something unpacked from the story holistically. So thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Barry, not the peppermints. You just brought back a lovely memory for me as well in church with my mama and her magic black purse that I tell you had everything you could possibly need. Thank you, sir, for your time today.
Exactly.
You know how we feel about you. We will support you forever, my friend. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, enjoy the holidays. Congratulations again on your marriage and great success with this film. Have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.